Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Week 2 of camp is almost in the books, and Sherrone Moore is happy with what he sees. Joining us on our game day segment this week will be Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3. Coach Sherrone Moore met with media on Tuesday and seemed relaxed and upbeat about his team. He was asked if any players had stood out to him in camp so far.
The guy that really has been where he was in the spring and taken the next step in fall camp is TJ Guy. He's a guy that's really taken that next step of, you got Josiah, you got Derek, and you got him, and you got other guys that are chomping at the bit, but he's really taken that step to be an elite player and be that guy that, you know, there's not that much of a drop off like last year. So I feel really good about TJ, and he's changed his body. He's done a lot of great things, and at every position you can go down the line, and we'll talk about other positions. But another guy that just jumps out is a guy that has started games for us is Gio Hadid. I mean, he's changed his body and the things, and then I think being behind Keegan and Zinner the past couple years, he's really done a really good job of learning. You know, we always say watch, emulate, surpass, and that's what he's trying to do. So those guys have all, you know, the whole team's been outstanding, but those two I could think specifically, and ironically, they're really, really close. I think they were roommates, so good to see.
There are high expectations that once again the offensive line will be very good. Sherrone said he's happy with how they are coming together so far.
They're coming together great, and you can ask the defensive guys. They're giving them a run for their money. You know, I know that as long as I'm here, we're going to be good up front. We're going to be violent. We're going to be physical. We're going to be tough, relentless, all the things you want. We have a couple guys that are cementing themselves at ones, but we, you know, not a whole first group yet. I think we got a lot of battles still going, and it's kind of like last year. We had guys who were starting. Miles Hinton started the first 4 or 5 games and then didn't start after that, but still played. So I think the competition is just going to continue to go into the season as we keep going, and excited to see who rolls out week 1.
Sherrone didn't give much away when asked about the quarterback competition.
I mean, they're all been really good. They've had their days that one guy's been good, one guy's been really good, one guy's been better. So not a front runner, really kind of all even playing right now, and we'll see how we go into this week, next week, and then game week.
He touched on the decision to bring back Jim as honorary captain and why it won't work out for the opener.
I just talked to Coach yesterday, and really what went into the decision is we made that decision like in March, or I think it was January or February actually. It was really to honor him of what he's done for Michigan. I mean, came back for 9 years and took us to where we are now. So it was really to honor him. It was nothing besides that. And you know, yesterday he called me, told me that didn't feel that he could leave his team in true Coach Harbaugh fashion, and wanted to be in the foxhole with his team and not want to make it look like he was taking a deep, long bow. So he's not going to make it for the game, but we're going to have some of our guys that are there, and then Jack and Jackie Harbaugh are going to take his place. So super excited about that.
Sherrone said after 2 weeks of practice he likes where his team is and is proud of their work ethic. He said they just have to keep working every day to get better. My guest today says he thinks Michigan will be a contender in the Big Ten race and be in contention for the 12-team playoffs, but it won't be easy. Up next is Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3, so stay with us. Back with us this week on our game day segment is Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3. Clayton, always great to have you with us, so welcome back.
Great to be here. I'm excited, and football is near, so very pumped for that as well.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks into fall camp now, almost 2 weeks, and we keep hearing the competition is heated, as you'd expect. Tuesday, Sherrone Moore met with the media and said, in his words, camp has been phenomenal, and my takeaway from watching him was how relaxed he was and really pumped up, wasn't he?
He was definitely fired up. I think I wrote that in one of my articles as well, that he, you know, was very fired up about what he's seen on the field. Obviously, he had to answer some questions about, you know, some of the different NCAA news that has come out lately, but more than anything, he wanted to talk about the players, the guys standing out, the way fall camp has gone, how they've played very physically, how, you know, there's no complacency, things like that. So I agree. And, he's getting better and better. It seems like every time he meets with the media, not that stuff matters all that much, but I feel like it's just another step of him settling into the job, which is nice to see heading into the first season under Sherrone Moore and a new era, even though it feels pretty similar to the last one.
Of course, everyone wants to know about the quarterback battle, whoever they're talking to on the staff. And I didn't read anything between the lines in Sherrone's comments. He said it was a day-to-day battle, and there's no timeline to name a starter. He said it could be the week of the game. It could be game day. So it's hard to get a good read on how that competition is going, isn't it?
It really is. And I think that's intentional, right, by Sherrone Moore. And obviously, a little bit of gamesmanship there. And you do have a really tough schedule going into, early on in this season. Obviously, Texas week 2, but Fresno State week 1 isn't a complete pushover either. So I think it's very intentional what Sherrone Moore was doing. Now, maybe it is true, right, that 3 guys are still in the mix: Alex Orji, Davis Warren, and Jack Tuttle. And maybe there is no separation, right? He said one day somebody plays great, the other guy plays really good, and then the other guy plays good. And then the next day it's kind of that same thing, but maybe in a different order. Somebody else is the one playing great. The other guys are behind him. So you want to see separation. You want to see somebody pull away. And, perhaps that is happening. So like you, I didn't have a huge takeaway on that other than the fact that it does not seem like they're going to name a starter until game week. As you said, game day potentially. And, the time most recently that has happened, I believe, was Denard Robinson in his sophomore year in 2010 when he took over for Tate Forcier. I think that was the last time Michigan went into a game day without naming a starter. And it can be exciting. That was a big win over UConn that day. Of course, the season didn't pan out the way Michigan wanted it to, but I think that they're going to, keep it close to the vest. And I also think that really anything's possible for the opener. Could we see all 3 of these guys out there, knowing, of course, you have to have a big lead as well to experiment, but knowing that Texas in week 2 wants to hone in on one guy and game plan, and probably even right now Texas wants to game plan and hone in on one guy, if it's Alex Orji or Jack Tuttle or Davis Warren. So some gamesmanship there, I think, knowing that the Longhorns are waiting in week 2.
Well, we heard the offense really took it to the defense in the first padded scrimmage over the weekend. And again, yesterday, Sherrone had high praise for his offensive line, said they're really coming together. And again, I don't know if what you can read between the lines on that, but he feels very good about his offensive line.
Yeah, and he said, as long as I'm here, we're going to have really good offensive lines. And that's paraphrasing, but it was pretty much exactly what he said. And you have to feel good about that part of things, right? I mean, he did such a good job really taking this offensive line to the next level over the last 3 years. I thought they were improving and very good under Ed Warner. And in 2018, when he took over, you could really tell a difference, that they had really leveled up. And a lot of those guys, of course, in 18 and 19, then were very experienced, had a lot of snaps under their belt, so that helped as well. But the move by Jim Harbaugh to promote Sherrone Moore to offensive line coach before 2021 was one of the more pivotal things that, decisions Jim Harbaugh made. And obviously it leads us to this day where Sherrone Moore is heading into an opener as Michigan's head coach. So huge for the program and potentially going forward. I think this offensive line, there's a lot of confidence in that building, it seems like, in this group. I've been encouraged by what these guys have talked about, Gio El-Hadi and Josh Preeve and, just talking about how this group has come together. I am a little hesitant, though, just because even last year when they had so much production coming back, they struggled a little bit early on to find their groove. So it could take a little bit of time, but I do feel like they have the parts here and they're adding some more depth to where at some point this year, this is going to be a very good line. And as Sherrone said, you have to trust him, right? That he knows what he's talking about when it comes to O-line play.
Well, I think it's interesting this time of the year at these pressers when a coach goes out of his way to sort of mention or pump up guys. And I thought yesterday or Tuesday when he mentioned Gio El-Hadi on offense, TJ Guy on defense on the edge. We know Gio's waited a long time for this, but he's played a lot of snaps. He's experienced. We expect him to be good. And TJ Guy stepping up, that would be huge, wouldn't it, Clayton?
It would be because, I really like what this starting defensive line is going to be. I mean, I think it could be the best in the country, but the one question has been the depth. And Sherrone Moore has continuously mentioned TJ Guy as somebody who has stood out throughout his career. And I would liken, his potential breakout status this year, similar to Mike Morris a couple of years ago, where I know he rotated in a little bit, and Mike Morris, he moved around the defensive line here and there in 2021, which is the first time we really saw him in somewhat of a significant role. But then in 22, he goes out there and really became one of the anchors of that D line, gets drafted, of course. Unfortunately, missed last year with an injury with the Seahawks, but is healthy now, playing under Mike McDonald. And if TJ, that was his senior year, right? His fourth season at Michigan. So I think TJ Guy could be in a similar mold. It seems like depth is building on the interior of the line. And then, at edge as well, I think you do have some competition with Cam Brandt, who's a sophomore. And then Dominic Nichols is another guy that Sherrone Moore just keeps mentioning as well, that he really likes, a freshman who early enrolled in the spring, had a big spring game, and, it seems to, be really turning heads behind the scenes.
Well, Sherrone, as you said, mentioned some of the freshmen who were standing out: Jaden Davis, Shannon Goodwin, the tight ends, Hanson and Priscorn, Jordan Marshall, which we've been hearing a lot about. He said he had a chance to be dynamic and special. You just mentioned Dominic Nichols, who everyone is saying has had a great camp. And then linebacker Cole Sullivan, you hear a lot of good things about him too. You wonder each year which freshman could see early playing time, have an impact. And it sounds like, at least right now, those are the guys to watch early, right, Clayton?
I think so. And as Sherrone Moore said, it's easier to play the further away you are from the ball. So wide receiver and maybe defensive back. But there are some guys in the mix that play relatively close to the ball, right? Jordan Marshall will have the ball in his hands, when he gets in there. And I think he really is going to be somebody who makes an impact at some point, whether we see him in garbage time early in the year and breaks off some runs, and then next thing the next game maybe gets a couple more carries, and could be, similar to Kalel Mullings last year, where I know Kalel Mullings was a veteran, but he was still somewhat new to the running back position. And early on in the year, before he had a hand injury, they got him some carries late, and they were like, okay, we might have something here that may warrant some snaps early on in games, and started to see that when he was healthy. So I think, the running back depth will kind of work itself out early on in the season, but Jordan Marshall certainly in the mix. And Cole Sullivan, I mean, I enjoyed so much watching him in the spring game, where it's one of those guys that just stands out on every play and that you have to watch. And you almost feel guilty not watching the rest of the play sometimes because you're so focused in, but he's that fun of a player, I think. And Dom Nichols as well. So, I mean, three of the guys there that Sherrone mentioned, but I feel like when you look at positions and, who's in front of them and things like that, those are the three probably most likely to play. But he did mention Shannon Goodwin, whether that's special teams or offense, the wideout spot, is going to contribute in some shape or form, as you noted there. So that one's interesting to me because that was the first we'd really heard of him standing out. So maybe we'll see him and some others as well. And I think Jaden Davis at quarterback, probably a year or two away, but obviously encouraging to hear some positive news there with him.
Well, Sherrone had a lot of good things to say about his receiving core, just as Coach Bellamy did the week before, especially the strides made by Tyler Morris. And I know a lot of our fans are, sort of in wait and see mode when it comes to those guys. But it sounds like as a group, Sherrone likes what he sees, doesn't he?
I think so. And I think that they do have talent at wide receiver, and if Tyler Morris is really going to be the guy if he can take on that big role and be just steady and trustworthy. I mean, think of how trustworthy last year Roman Wilson was from game one on, where JJ McCarthy knew, whether it was on platform or off script, that he could find number one. It's going to have to be the same thing with whoever the quarterback is. Do they have that go-to guy outside of your tight end and Colston Loveland, who we can't discount the impact that he's going to have. But I think it's really important to have somebody at the wide receiver spot that can do that. And Tyler Morris is certainly the guy they're pointing to. Samaj Morgan, they're saying he's looking to become more of a complete receiver and is really bought into the blocking aspect of things. No block, no rock, as Ron Bellamy says. And Samaj Morgan, is kind of a Ron Bellamy guy, right? Played for him in high school, so he certainly is bought in there. And then Frederick Moore, I think, is potentially an X factor. If he can give you enough production as kind of a third wide receiver, then I think you do have a pretty good core here. And we have to remember, too, that Tyler Morris had 13 catches last year. And it seems low and it seems weird to say, okay, a guy with 13 catches is now going to be your go-to guy. But this has happened at Michigan. They don't throw the ball as much as some other teams. They don't play as many receivers as much as some other teams. So if you don't have the opportunity, like Roman Wilson did a few years ago, then you may not expect a ton from them the next year, but then they break out, right? Roman Wilson ended up getting 60, 70 targets or something like that. So there's opportunity to make a big jump in this offense, and Tyler Morris is the guy I would circle as somebody that certainly can do that.
Well, another position battle we're watching is who will start at the corner opposite Will Johnson. From what Sherrone said on Tuesday, and maybe it was more the way he said it, Jair Hill has been outstanding in camp. So it sounds like he might be the other starter at corner, doesn't it, Clayton?
It does. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's some sort of rotation there early on in the season, kind of like there was last year when, Josh Wallace came in, but then he sees that job pretty quickly. And I think that's kind of what you want to see there. And getting guys reps early on in the year isn't a bad thing either, because somebody can go down like Will Johnson in the Ohio State game, and you're going to need others to step up. Now, luckily, they had Mikey Sanders still, who could slide over as well and be really solid there. But I think building that depth is important. I mean, we saw a number of injuries in the defensive backfield for Michigan last season. They had to play some different safeties. Makari Page was not 100% during the national championship game. Keon Sabb comes in and has a big impact. Quentin Johnson came in the Rose Bowl, had a big impact with a forced fumble. So depth will be important, but it did sound like Jair Hill is still leading the way there. Amir Hall, the Albany transfer, pushing him along with some other guys as he gets up to speed. So if Amir Hall can be similar to what Josh Wallace did last year in terms of picking things up really quickly despite coming in the summer, and then kind of acclimating to the speed of the game at this level. And of course, Amir Hall's jumping up even an extra level, having come from the SBS. But if he can do that, then I think you got probably three really serviceable corners. Of course, it's weird to call Will Johnson that. We know he's much more than that, but three guys that you can really trust and put in there.
Well, another positive I thought or took away from the presser on Tuesday was Sherrone mentioned that Rayshon Benny is back practicing like nothing ever happened. And he broke his leg in the Rose Bowl, if folks remember. So that is really great news and adds some much-needed depth, doesn't it?
For sure. And, you look at the defensive tackle rotation and you see three guys who, and Rayshon Benny would start most places, but you have perhaps two of the best, and if not the two best, defensive tackles in the country. Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Rayshon Benny comes in. They played 5 D tackles last year, 240 or more snaps, and all three of those guys were in that mix. So you're kind of looking for those next two. And Lou Esposito said this week on the In the Trenches podcast that Eno Etta, who moved over from edge to defensive tackle in the spring, is now up to 308 pounds, has really impressed there. Trey Pierce, who's his classmate as a sophomore, more of a nose tackle. And then Ike Luna, a guy who's a redshirt junior who has never played a snap during games at Michigan. All three of those guys are in the mix. So if you can get, find the next Cam Good, find the guy who was the Rayshon Benny last year, then I think you really have a good mix there. You don't want to take Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham off the field all that much, but you got to keep them fresh as well. So that's important. And I know it was one of the big keys for the staff coming into fall camp, and it sounds like they've found some options there here through a couple weeks.
Yeah, and a lot of us going into the season or in the off season talked about, well, we're not going to have the depth that we've had the last couple of years on that D line, but I thought it was interesting what Coach Esposito said. Well, you've got a lot of young men who you've just not heard of yet that are unknown, but they're going to be really good football players. So I felt good about that too.
Definitely, and that's kind of what Michigan D lines do. I mean, our good friend John Borton, who I work with at the Wolverine, of course, a recurring guest of this show. And, I remember at Big Ten Media Day in 2022, he asked Mozzie Smith a question about, hey, how are you going to replace all these guys, Aiden Hutchinson and, David Ojabo and others up front? And Mozzie said, man, we've been doubted every single year. And every single year, Michigan has a great defensive line. And sure enough, they were even better at the other positions, outside of Hutchinson and Ojabo, but better on the interior. Than they were the year before. Last year, they were even better than they were in 2022. And, this year, they might have more talent, at least on the interior, than they did last year, at least with the starting group. So it's just kind of what Michigan does, it feels like. And Lou Esposito has been really impressive in the early going, the way he's recruited, the way He's motivated these guys the way the players have talked about him. So I think it could be it's got to be the strength of this team, I think. And, it has to be really to unlock the potential of this defense because it all starts up front.
Well, Sherrone also touched on the place kicking competition, which a lot of us, were concerned about. But he said the transfer Dominic Zavada, I'm not sure how you actually pronounce his name yet, but that he's talked about how really good he's been. And J.B. Brown, I think last week mentioned, was it six or seven from beyond 50 yards and very good inside the 50. But Sherrone mentioned that Adam Samaha was having some really good practices. So from everything we're hearing, and again, especially from what J.B. Brown said last week, Zavada is another big-time leg, isn't he?
I think so. And that it was really stood out. Something that stood out to me when he committed was this guy's made a 56-yard field goal in a game in college football. He's made a 53-yarder, I think two 53-yarders. I guess it would just be one, but he's 2 of 3 from 50-plus in his career. He is 12 of 14 from 40 to 49 yards. So really good, really consistent from the long distances. It's good to hear that when he's in a new setting now, playing at Michigan, a little more pressure to be good, and will be facing his former team in week 3, that he is acclimated well. And I love to hear, Mike, an actual stat or a fact of what goes on in fall camp. It's a little different than, hey, this guy's looked good or this guy's looked good, and the D-lines, they're playing fast or whatever. But to actually know a stat, hey, this guy made 6 or 7 from 50-plus in actual game-type situations during practice was really good. I would expect him to win the job. I think that was the plan all along, and sounds like so far so good.
Yeah. Well, another thing we learned from Sherrone's presser is that Jim will not serve as honorary captain for the opener. I think his mom and his dad will be there. They'll represent him. And I wondered if Jim would take, the time away from the Chargers this time of the year to be there. So, it's understandable why he can't. But, man, would that have been fun to see him walk out the tunnel or what?
It would have been amazing, and really surreal to think. It would kind of take you back to the whole 9-year journey of, him coming back and leaving the NFL. And then, this slow build and climb that, these different rungs on the ladder that Michigan had to reach and get over the hump against these rivals and beat Ohio State and then win a college football playoff game and then to win it all for the first time since 1997. I think he would have gotten as big of a standing ovation, as long of a standing ovation as there has been really in any situation like that in Michigan Stadium history. So obviously would have been very cool. I do think things got blown out of proportion a little bit with, Ward Manuel saying on a podcast that Jim was going to come for the opener. That got aggregated right after he got his 4-year show cause from the NCAA. People took it as, Michigan's sticking the middle finger up to the NCAA and bringing Harbaugh back. It's not true. That was scheduled back in the winter. He was planning on it all this time. And I think if you watched, as I did, a little bit of the Chargers preseason game over the weekend on Saturday, where they didn't get a first down until their 7th drive, I think Jim realized, hey, I can't, 1 week before we open the season against the Raiders, I can't leave this team, especially, with how much work they have to do. And obviously they're pretty banged up right now with Justin Herbert out. So that didn't surprise me. He said he didn't want to, make it seem like he's taking a deep, long bow 1 week before starting his NFL journey back up with the Chargers. I certainly respect it. I certainly understand it. And as you said, it's kind of Harbaugh fashion. I'm sure he'll come back for some game at some point, maybe not this year, and hopefully receive that same type of standing ovation.
No, I'm sure he will, and again, very understandable why he can't make it for the opener. So, it'll be fun when he does come back in the future. Well, Sherrone briefly touched on, this NCAA stuff at the presser, and as you and I talked about before we started taping, it just it's sort of nice this week so far. We haven't had a lot of it. But he said he looks forward to the texts being released, and man, we heard about those last week. Again, mentioned there has been full cooperation with the NCAA. He sounded very relaxed when talking about that issue, though, didn't he, Clayton?
Definitely. And I think that he's very confident in what would come out if those texts were released. Obviously, we have heard some rumblings going back to last week that is a possibility. Of course, I don't know the exact rules on, confidentiality of the investigation. I know people at Michigan probably weren't happy that things got leaked a week or two ago, but if those do get released, I think Sherrone Moore is pretty confident in the outcome there. And, look, the ESPN report with the draft of the notice of allegations didn't include a serious charge, a level 1 charge for Sherrone Moore based on the text messages. It was only that he had deleted them, probably out of a panic, once media reports came out that Connor Stalions was at the center of this investigation. So it tells me that they're not serious. Again, that just reaffirms it with what Sherrone Moore said on Tuesday. And I think if they do get released, people will be able to move forward. And really the focus is on the 2024 team. I mean, things aren't going to play out in the short term here with the NCAA. They have things resolved from the now it's bacon cheeseburger gate. And then obviously the sign stealing stuff, that's going to drag on. Think of, for the minor recruiting violations, it took 4 years to resolve. So I'm thinking it's going to be quite a while here for this next investigation. And, things are going to cool down, as you said here, I think, in the next couple of weeks, and we can just focus on football.
No, they're sort of going to cool down. I want to focus on football, too, but we've got the Connor Stalions Netflix documentary coming up. I think it's on August the 27th, the week of the opener. And I wonder, do you think we will really learn anything new other than Connor's take on the whole situation?
Well, I do stand somewhat corrected that it will come back up on August 27th. So great point. Great point. I think a couple things. One, in any of these situations, no one on their side really wants to dig too much into the full context. And I think this is a little different because I think Michigan fans have been pretty involved here. But, when it was Kansas and the FBI wiretaps, if you didn't like Kansas, and if you are a fan of following rules, for the most part, I think you painted Bill Self a certain way. Obviously, then he ends up getting his lifetime contract or whatever. But same thing with North Carolina when they had the academic issues there, where the fake classes and things like that. Everyone painted them a certain way. So if you're an Ohio State fan in this case, I don't think you're going to change your mind. If you're a Michigan fan in this case, I think you're only going to have more confidence in your own stance. But it's not to say that there won't be some interesting information in there. I think Connor Stalions is probably going to talk about, some of the things that we heard throughout the fall last year that, hey, every big time school has a sign stealer. If you're not trying to steal signs, you're not really, you're not giving yourself the best possible advantage. It doesn't mean you have to break the rules. And, if Michigan did that, obviously they will be punished for it. But I think that there's just going to be added context to the story and to this kind of, worst kept secret maybe in the college football world that stealing signs, is pretty common. And there's a reason why you have signs, right? Is that, and this goes back to playing Pop Warner football. You always have different signs so that the opponent doesn't know what you're running. It's a part of the game. So I think to that extent, we will learn some more about what exactly goes on there, what exactly Connor Stalions did, and how the NCAA responded, whether it was too much or too little. I would say it's probably the former, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be tough to resist staying up until midnight or whenever it releases on that night to watch it, because it should be pretty interesting, and I'm sure it'll dominate the conversation for a few days or something like that. Oh,
man, yeah, it will. And I have to give Netflix credit. I think the NCAA and their folks could take an example or a lesson from Netflix. They have not leaked a peep about what's coming out in that documentary, have they?
Right. No. I would imagine there were probably some non-disclosures there, but I do know who a few people that are being interviewed in it are going to be, and I do think there will be some light shed on what exactly goes on here, what other teams are doing as well, which could be the fascinating part of this. And it's going to be interesting to see.
Well, Clayton, before camp started, I know most of us, probably all of us, were really jacked up and excited about this team 145, and the national media seem to think Michigan is still a formidable team, as we do. But I wasn't sure what the tone from the staff and the players would be during camp. From the coaching staff to the players that you're seeing at media availabilities, they are giving off very confident vibes, aren't they?
I think so. And, Sherrone Moore has kind of done that, when even he was asked the other day about, how much talent you lost, 13 guys to the NFL. He kind of quickly said, well, we got a lot of talent here. We got 4 or 5 guys that could go in the first round of the draft next year, and I think they're very quick to point out what is coming back despite, the Rod Moore injury, 13 guys to the draft, a couple more that were undrafted free agents, and 7 of your 10 assistant coaches along with Jim Harbaugh. It's a lot to lose, but at least in the short term here, Michigan has a lot back, and they seem confident about it. I think a lot of the confidence comes from knowing you have a potentially elite defense again, and then an offense that really is a little bit more experienced than people would think. And Kurt Campbell, Michigan's offensive coordinator, has mentioned that a couple times, where he said, we only have one guy who was technically a returning starter last year in tight end Colston Loveland, but we have several guys who have started in the past. And I, counted it up, and it's 10 players with 109 combined starts just on offense in college football. Josh Preeb was a starter at Northwestern. Giovanni El-Hadi started a few games a couple years ago on the offensive line at Michigan. Miles Hinton was a starter at Stanford. Tyler Morris has started games. Max Bredesen. You could go on and on. So, Samaj Morgan as well, I believe. So, there is some confidence there. I will say that a question mark is still the quarterback spot, the consistency of the offense, especially early on in the season. But if they win that Texas game, Mike, and they're 2-0, and you have Arkansas State, and then you have confidence going in to some of those other big games, USC, Washington, and then the rest of the way. But you also have a really good win on your resume that people are going to look at. You could drop 2-3 games potentially at the end of the year, still get in the playoff, and I think that's why there are so many possibilities for this team, just because there's a chance to build a really good resume, and there's still a lot of talent here that wants to prove themselves as well. They're hungry. The guys who didn't start last year are as hungry as anybody to get their own national championship, get their own Big Ten championship as a main player and starter on this team.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Clayton. This month I'm asking every one of my guests to cover Michigan the same question, since we're in speculation mode, or as I told you at the top of the show, I call it Speculation Month. This is it. It's sort of a 2 questions, but would you be surprised if this team, 145, is in contention for the Big Ten championship and a playoff spot, or are the expectations maybe too high right now?
I wouldn't be surprised, and I would expect them, in fact, to be in that mix. Well, I wouldn't be shocked if there may be a tier below that, in kind of maybe regress to 18, 19, Michigan type of teams, but I'm not predicting it at this point. I think they're going to be right in the mix, and Ohio State is very good. I think that it's going to be tough to also play Texas in the non-conference, but obviously it won't count against your Big Ten record. And I know Oregon is receiving a ton of hype this year, but I'm not sure what they're going to be by November with all that travel, having to adjust to a new conference. I'd pick Michigan to win that game on November 2nd, and that could go a long way in determining what the race in the Big Ten looks like heading into Columbus on November 30th. And Mike, you and I know when they go down there, guys like Donovan Edwards, guys like Rayshon Benny, who have made plays down there, and those are just 2 off the top of my head. There are others, right? Makari Page, who has an interception in that building, and many others are going to play with absolutely no fear against the Buckeyes. And even on the Ohio State side, they may have a little bit of that mental hurdle they have to get over, like Michigan had for the better part of 2 decades, or that Ohio State had in the 1990s when quote unquote worst Michigan teams were able to beat Ohio State, because that's what they did, right?
Right.
So this is a rivalry of that's very cyclical. Michigan has the upper hand right now, so I'm not predicting Michigan to win the Big Ten, but I'm predicting that they have a chance, and I'm predicting that they will be right in the mix.
Well, it is going to be one heck of a long and exciting season, and for my listeners who are not subscribers to the Wolverine on 3, I keep telling them you should be, because every day you've got your podcasts, you've got just great content. So for our listeners out there who are not subscribers yet, I don't know if you have any deals going on right now, but tell us about what is available.
Yeah, the Wolverine.com is the place to go, and they can use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. So you can get in on the message board. You can read all of our premium articles, our insider intel from guys like Chris Ballas and EJ Holland for just $1 for 2 months. So if you sign up right now, I'm thinking, well, you get the beginning of the season, you get really about halfway through the year. And then, who knows? Maybe they'll want to stick around as well. But I appreciate that, Mike, for having me on, and for promoting the Wolverine as well. You're a known friend and trusted agent.
Well, I've been with the Wolverine as a subscriber and the Wolverine On3 for a long time. Again, to all of my listeners, you don't know what you're missing, so check it out and look at the code, the promo code in the show notes too, Clayton. So thanks again for taking so much time from your very busy schedule right now to join us. Our guest has been Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine On3, and we will get you back very soon. I think the next time we talk, we'll be dissecting one of the games, which we can't wait for. So again, thanks for the time, and we look forward to that next visit.
Can't wait. Thanks so much for having me.
On Quick Hits today, once again, no injury news to report after 2 weeks of practice. The only injury news this week concerned J.J. McCarthy, who underwent surgery on Wednesday for a torn meniscus. The Vikings said he will be out for the season. A tough break for J.J. after a really nice start the other night in the first preseason game of the year, so we hope he has a quick recovery. A reminder to tell your Wolverine family and friends about the show, and join us again next week as we continue to preview the upcoming season and give you the latest news out of fall camp. That does it for now. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!